Okay, so I am recording a like check-in video for me to cover a bunch of different books, like what really stood out to me recently, what I'm reading right now. Um, I think I'm mostly gonna focus on Severance by Ling Ma. I just finished that one yesterday. I really liked it. It's certainly a trip to read now when you consider like when it was written. Um, More on that in a moment. And then I have some books I'm reading right now. Um, so let's just get to it. Yeah, and I'll put links to the books I'm talking about in the description. Since a lot of the books I've read recently, I've had to return to the library. So I'm gonna start out with Severance by Ling Ma, as mentioned above. Um, oh yeah, and also I'm just talking spoilers because it's too annoying to avoid them. So if you don't want to get spoiled, beware. Anyway, Severance by Ling Ma. The plot is about a global pandemic disease. It's lethal. It eventually wipes out humankind, but not before uh, gradually spreading around the globe, disrupting society. Does any of this sound familiar? um, but the book was actually published in 2018, I believe. So it's a little bit prescient. Um, we During the plot of this book, we sort of flit back and forth um, in multiple timelines. So there's the main character Candace is part of a group of people who are immune to the disease, and they're sort of on a journey through this post-apocalyptic wasteland. There's the story of Candace's life before, like her sort of adult life in New York City before the fever hits. And then we also occasionally get a few flashbacks of Candace's younger years. Um, and so the book jumps around a lot between these like two and a half storylines. I think it generally is done pretty well. Um, and there's a lot to discuss about this book, actually, even though it's like pretty short. So, Candace, our main character, is the daughter of two immigrants from China. And so the book definitely focuses a lot on the immigrant experience to the United States, what the role of immigration plays in society at large, but not just immigration, but also like globalization. There's a scene where Candace, uh, well, I guess we deal with the uh, ramifications of globalization, both in China and other countries that are sort of like um, having their labor forces exploited. We have There's a lot of critiques of like the soul crushingness of participating in a capitalist system, um, where Candace like has this sort of absurdist role as the manufacturing coordinator for Bibles. um, it's I think it feels a little bit absurdist because it's the same text over and over again, but just with various different treatments and styles, and it's not like it's not bringing any value, but it is sort of like the way her job is broken down is like, oh, we're gonna get you with this special leather, and um, wow, I'm really going on a tangent here. Okay, so I'll bring it back. The general idea of the book, I think, is focusing on the potential excesses of capitalism. I think that's the thesis, and there's a lot of different arrows that point in that direction. One, the entire plot line about Candace's life as a young adult in New York City is very much focused on the millennial experience of engaging with capitalism in the 90s and the early 2000s. Um, Candace as a young woman moves to New York. She and all of her peers sort of start out idealistic and fun um, and quirky and they have goals and they're also kind of deadbeats. They hang out at cafes every day. And Candace spends all of her time, I think she says, like looking to get picked up. I mean, she basically goes and tries to meet people and have romantic entanglements, and she ends up having a brief affair with a guy, like an older gentleman, who ironically is like a writer about how uh, millennials are like lazy and entitled. Um, and I think it's that's something very poignant to a lot of young people is finding yourself in a situation where you're struggling, but also um, constantly being told how lazy you are. It's not uh, certainly still relevant today, right? um, so anyway, there's Candace's you know eventual struggle with finding herself. She sort of ends up by happenstance in this random corporate job, and she succeeds at it. She becomes really good at her job, but she also kind of loses herself. Well, in some ways she loses herself, and in some ways she finds herself. Actually, I think it could be fair to say. Um, and then there's her relationship with Jonathan, who sort of represents the rejection of the system. He attempts to live in New York, but like completely participating as little as possible in a capitalist society. Like he tries to spend as little money as possible. He only works temporary jobs, and he pursues art. I mean, writing essentially. Um, but he's sort of. I mean, he is driven away by his refusal to participate in a capitalist society, because he eventually is like, I can't stand living in New York anymore. I think the scene where he and Candace break up is obviously quite emotional. Uh, I think the line that really stuck out to me was Candace's sort of diagnosis of Jonathan's philosophy towards life, where he used to think, or like she used to agree with Jonathan that like true freedom was trying to participate in the system as little as possible, um, but there's a line in there which is like, in this world, like money is freedom. That's no way to it's no way to live if you're just completely unable to um ever spend money on anything in life that gives you pleasure. I think is sort of the idea there. And I have to say that line definitely resonated with me. It does sort of feel like sometimes we're being asked to spend 5/7 of our life on something that we may not really care about that much. But at the end of the day, as an individual, it beats the alternative, I guess. We don't really get the chance to opt out, most of us. Um, and actually, when the pandemic hits, we see that Candace finds refuge in the in her job. She has this pathological need to keep doing her job, even as the world is breaking down around her, even as she I mean, she has a pregnancy that she's carrying to term, and there's a deadly pandemic everywhere, and public transportation is breaking down. So she walks, miles to work every day. She eventually moves into the office building. Yeah, so there's this whole plot line. There's also a very touching plot line with Candace's relationship with her parents. I think it's a very realistic portrayal of um, well, like a loving but tenuous relationship with parents, as well as um the the immigrant experience, which is not something that is like directly relevant to my life. But it has uh it's a story that I'm tangentially familiar with through many acquaintances of mine, and I guess it's like it's a good exploration of that. Um, I think so. There's a couple things I want to. There's a couple big questions I want to discuss before moving on from Severance, but because this has kind of been a crapshoot of review, honestly, I've just been rambling. I'm a little bit tired, but first of all, what does the fever symbolize? When the fever affects people, it makes people do the same thing they normally do over and over again, but with no awareness, no consciousness, um, no self regard, no self regulation, no ability to stop. I think, I mean, it's kind of an allegory for drudgery, right? Which is the ultimate problem of a capitalist society in a lot of ways, is we kind of just end up doing the same thing over and over again, and it creates a sense of alienation. um, I think that's the best I could come up with for like what the fever means. I haven't looked this up, so I'm sure there's been discourse on the imagery at play here that I may have missed. Um, the only wrinkle in that I noticed is like, I think that when they were going to Ashley's childhood home, Ashley had previously not Ashley had previously been immune to Shen fever. But when they went to her childhood home, she all of a sudden got the disease. So that is like, what is the, because that's like this extra detail that didn't need to be there. And it's like, why did that get added? I'm honestly not sure. I've been thinking about it since yesterday, and it's like, is I mean, surely nostalgia isn't like something that we're attacking here, is it? I mean, maybe it is. I don't know. Um, that one definitely is something I'll be thinking about. Um, Beyond that, the other question I have is sort of like, what was the point of the post-apocalyptic part of the story? We had this sort of mini group society that was formed after the apocalypse, which I mean, I think is meant to demonstrate that humans create hierarchy no matter what. Humans are cliquey no matter what. We had the character of Bob, who I think is described at the start as sort of just being a leader by default. It's like an old boomerish guy, um, crippled, injured, religious, overbearing, um, often cruel. Uh, always justifies his own cruelty with greater good narratives or your own good narratives. At one point, like is sort of obsessed with killing the fevered, where he even kills one of the non-fevered members of the group because she's getting in the way of him killing one of the Ashley, who after she became fevered. Bob also has them on this grand quest to settle in an abandoned mall in Ohio. And it's sort of like people were wondering during the trip, like, why this mall? And then it's revealed that he wanted to go back to the place of his, like I think he used to spend all of his childhoods there, and he even became a part owner of the mall later. And you know what? Now I'm realizing, because at the end of the book, Candace finds that Bob is walking at night and he's fevered, right? And she sort of takes out her rage on him because he's kept her a prisoner for months. But so she murders him. And then that made me think, like, okay, so Ashley has described that Bob has been walking the mall at night repeatedly, every night, and Bob seems to have no memory of this. So in my head, I'm like, was he like secretly fevered half the time? And it's another place of nostalgia, actually. You know, that I didn't even make that connection, but there's definitely a connection between nostalgia and the fever. I think I need to, like, read some analysis of this from other people smarter than me. I don't know. This is it's an interesting book for sure. Overall, really liked the book. I think I was a little bit disappointed by the ending. I mean, it's one of those endings that's, I think, supposed to leave you with some sort of symbolic message, and I wasn't really sure what it was. So, maybe I just need to get good. Beyond that, beyond Severance, what did I read last week? Just checking my Goodreads. I read this book called Dreadful by Caitlin Rozakis. It was a fun little book, fantasy book. The premise was main character wakes up having just lost all of his memories, slowly gathers from context clues that he is an evil dark wizard. He has kidnapped a princess. He is in the midst of this dastardly plot with a group of other dark wizards. And perhaps before losing his memories, he wasn't that great of a person. Would kind of just, murder people, and also was insecure and kind of a loser. So it's a pretty interesting exploration of, like, morality, and defining who you are as a person. Is it your intentions, or is it actions, or is it both? And can you change your intentions afterwards? And are there some actions that you can or cannot make up for? So I like that book. It was cute. It was pretty fast. The other book I read in the past couple weeks was The Ministry for the Future by Kim Stanley Robinson. That book was hefty. A lot of it was, like, sort of just info dumps. It oscillated back and forth a lot between, like, really moving stories of, like, humanity banding together to solve. In this book, the villain is just sort of like climate change as a whole. Um, there's an amazing. My favorite part of the book was this one page chapter describing the sun as like a malevolent divine being that takes away life or grants it. I mean, the first chapter is amazing. Um, the main characters, I was sort of whatever about, honestly. I think a lot of the problem with the book is that there's sort of a lot of there's a lot of future inventions that are sort of contrived to wave away a lot of the world's problem or a lot of the problems with getting global cooperation, such as there's just like this magical blockchain technology that like makes it really easy to have like a globalized carbon coin. I mean, it's a cool policy idea, but I think it's just sort of wrapped up as like too easy. Um, I think actually the one that bothered me the most was these like magic missiles that became basically impossible. Like missiles that become are both incredibly cheap and also like impossible to defend against. With the development of this technology becoming widespread, so any civilian could basically act as a terrorist against any government. And then sort of the lack of like governments are just sort of okay with this. Um, I think in general, a lot of the trends do feel like pretty good predictions. The emergence of climate terrorist groups does kind of seem like something that could happen. Um, I mean, for better or for worse. Um, I think the pumping the water from underneath an iceberg in the North and South Pole actually sounds pretty interesting. Um, I wonder. I mean, I'm sure scientists have looked into that. Shit. What else? I think the book is a very it's very good at highlighting the problem. It's very good at throwing out a bunch of different possible solutions. There's some poignant descriptions of Switzerland as a nation. Really focuses on Switzerland because a lot of characters are living in Zurich. I don't know. It's a great book if you specifically care about like climate change and geopolitics and really like neoliberal wonky policy stuff. Um, and even as someone who fits that description mostly, it was also like just a lot. So I don't know. There's some people for whom it's definitely their favorite book, and then a lot of other people who are like, "What the hell is this?" Um, anyway, what am I reading right now? This is a book I got from uh, a person in my life whom I care about. Um, this is a short story collection by Curtis Sittenfeld. I've only read the first the first two short stories. They both seem to deal with like gender roles and relationships. The first one I really liked. I think it captured sort of a lot of the the unspoken tension between men and women that sort of came to the forefront during and after the 2016 election in American society. I think that story really captured it. Um, I'd like to talk a little bit about this book, Engines of Empire by R.S. Ford. Really enjoying it so far. It's about, well, as far as I can tell, it's about a lot of different things, but some of the general themes are Um, definitely colonialism. There's a lot of, I mean, we're sort of getting into the lore a little bit. We follow four main characters, a mother and her three children. And they're sort of, it's interesting that we start with all of them gathered in one place and then they sort of scatter to the different corners of the world. I'm still only, how many pages am I in this? Like 220 pages in there. Looking forward to seeing more of it. I think the world is pretty interesting. We've got multiple we have this country Torwin that's doing amazing things with technology, but in order to do that, they're invading and stealing natural resources from multiple different indigenous populations on neighboring islands and justifying it by denying their humanity. And sounds familiar, right? And then we have all this lore. There are themes of magic and religion that are being discussed. Excuse me. It's time that I should wrap this up. There are themes of magic and religion being discussed. There's fuck, I don't know. I'm too tired for this shit. Basically, it's a good book. I'll update once I finish it, but really enjoying it. All right, it's late. I got work in the morning. I'm a part of society too, I guess. But thanks for hanging out with me. I will catch y'all later.